What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode, guess you could say episode, of the Culture Clash here on the Pryce Podcast edition. That's the word I want. Anywho, this live, we'll be talking about community, why it's important, and why it has escaped us. Now, before we get started, don't forget, go to pricemeter.com/discord. Join the Discord server. If you want to know about other like-minded people, if you want to join a community of others who share your mindsets, who share your faith, who who share the same personalities, kind of, not really same personalities, but who are just like-minded people, just like yourselves. Go to pricemedia.com/discord. Join the Discord community where we could come together, help each other out. If there are projects you guys want to start, go ahead and start it. Find other people who will be interested in interested in that project as well, and then also help other people out. Other people who starts a project that you might like. Whatever it is that you guys want to do, join the community on Discord. pricemedia.com/discord. Now, with that out of the way, tonight we confront one of the most consequential battles for the future of our nation: the ideological transformation of American community and the local enterprise that sustains it. From the voluntary associations, Main Street businesses, churches, and neighborly bonds that once defined belonging to a professionalized industry of managed equity, foundation excuse me, foundation funded activism, and the erosion of genuine social trust. We examined the historical foundations of the American community, why it is important, what happened to it, and of course, commerce and the transformation, the ideological shifts that reframed community into what it is today. From the free association and mutual responsibility into a vehicle for social engineering, identity grievance, and the nonprofit industrial complex, and the profound tensions that this creates with social capital, economic vitality, family formation, and ordered liberty, and the moral fabric of a free society. We proceed without evasion, without ideological slogans, and without allegiance to any faction, only with the history, empirical data, ethical analysis, and a clear-eyed assessment of the long-term implications for the United States in 2026 and beyond. Now, as always, we begin with the historical trajectory. How did it all started? Where was the foundation, and when did it start to crumble? So, for much of America's history, much of it, community rested on the Judeo-Christian foundation and classical principles of voluntary association and free enterprise. Alexis de Tocqueville, observing the young republic, marveled that Americans of every condition constantly formed associations, not only commercial and industrial companies, but religious, moral, education, and mutual aid societies of every size and purpose. Every size and purpose. Where the French looked at the state and the English to the autocracy, Americans formed associations to build churches, schools, hospitals, and local commerce. Local businesses were not merely economic units, they were the commercial backbone of neighborhoods. Third, places where trust was built, reputations were earned, and neighbors became stakeholders in one another's flourishing. The purpose of government, as the founders understood, was limited, and I mean limited, to secure the conditions under which free people could associate, trade, and govern themselves. High social trust, dense networks of voluntary institutions, and cultural norms that rewarded responsibilities and reciprocity. Sorry, can't talk right now. Helped produce the resilient local communities that characterize much of American life through the mid 20th century. Water, good for you guys. Highly recommend it. Now, the pivotal turning point arrived with the rise of the progressive community organizing and the professionalism of community itself in the mid to late 20th century. Drawing from Marxist frameworks, Saul Alinsky style tactics, and later critical theories, these ideologies recast organic community not as the fruit of free association and moral formation, but as a site of systemic power, oppression, and unequal outcomes. The root causes narrative displaced personal agency. The root causes narratives displaced personal agency and mutual responsibility. Government programs and foundation funding increasing substituted professional nonprofits and paid organizers for the older mediating institutions of family, church, and local commerce. By the late 20th century and early 21st centuries, and especially after 2020, concepts such as community equity, racial capitalism, stakeholder mandates, DEI compliance, and expansive definitions of belonging gained institutional traction. Progressive urban policies, soft on crime approaches, terrible idea, by the way, heavy regulation, again, terrible idea, by the way, and identity based contracting, probably the worst idea ever created. Anything identity based, terrible. Framed traditional roots and traditional local business and voluntary associations as insufficient or even compliant in injustice. How? What began as efforts to address genuine poverty and exclusion evolved into a de facto industry, the business of community, in which professional staff, foundation grants, and activist networks managed outcomes rather than fostering self governing citizens. The cultural and institutional capture accelerated all of this. Media, academia, activist organizations, and certain corporate and foundation funders amplified the narrative that American local enterprise and traditional community norms perpetrate in inequity. Somehow, some way, local businesses, local enterprises, who's that? And traditional community perpetuates inequality or inequity. Inequity. Okay. Terms as gentrification, exclusionary zoning, and expansive claims of systemic exclusion reshaped policy, training, and public discourse. Dissenting business owners, pastors, or citizens who insisted on the realities of social capital, family structure, crime's impact on commerce, or the necessity, sorry, necessity of voluntary rather than coerced association. Were frequently labeled as reactionary or insufficiently progressive and faced professional or social sanctions. Neighborly interaction declined. Main streets struggled, and the trust eroded. Now we turn to the empirical realities that ground this debate. Recent data documents a sharp sorry, recent data documents a sharp and ongoing decline in the everyday social fabric that once defined American community. Look, when I was a kid, going outside, playing ball with the friends. We have a game called Elephant, where you have to catch the ball, and if you drop the ball, you gain a letter to the animal. And if you intentionally don't try to go for the ball, you gain a letter. And basically, once you get all the letters of that animal, you're out. Now we also do it with shorter names like pig and horse and all that type of stuff. But it was fun. It's fun time. Really fun time. And that is what community is about. Hanging out with when you're a kid, just hanging out with your friends, going outside, being active, talking to people, finding love. Now, according to the American Enterprise Institute Survey Center on American Life, the percentage of young adults who talk to their neighbors at least a few times per week dropped from 51% in 2012 to just 25% in the mid 2020s. Overall, only about 40% of Americans report regularly neighborly conversation, down substantially from nearly 60% a decade earlier. Social capital social capital metrics continue to track the long decline, first popularized by Robert Putnam, with loneliness elevated to public health emergency status and trust in fellow citizens as historic lows. Main Street businesses, those with physical locations and revenues under roughly $10 million, give or take, have seen growth stall, expanding less than 1% in recent annual periods while larger firms pulled ahead. Retail crime alone cost American businesses nearly $100 billion annually. That's in retail alone. We're not talking about anything else like in real estate or nothing. This is retail alone. Crime shot up. Small operators reports repeated theft, vandalism, and the costly fortification of storefronts. If we're such a high trust society, if we're supposed to trust our neighbors, why are we having to fortify our storefronts? Having to get a ring camera and see who's at the doorbell who's ringing the doorbell at our front door. Just saying. All right? Think about that, guys. Think about that. Now, many urban commercial corridors have emptied as disorder, regulation, and rising costs drove owners and capital elsewhere. The result is not merely economic, it is social. Fewer third places, weaker informal networks, and diminished capacity for neighbors to solve problems without turning to distant bureaucracies or professional advocates. How did it get this far? Now, these outcomes, which I'm pretty sure we all know, like I said earlier, with activism, with the government becoming to like giving more power to the government. I think that was the biggest fail that we did as Americans. I need to shave, but that is the biggest fail that we have done as Americans is giving the government more power when at its foundation it should be very, very, very limited government, which I like. The we had more regulations. It's wild. Why do we need so many regulations? Please, somebody tell me why. But I digress. Now, all these outcomes coincide with the expansion of ideological content in the language of funding of community. Oh, sorry. Ideological content in language and funding of community. What type of communities are we talking about? The LGBTQ, LGBTQIA plus. I think that's how you say it. I don't know. It's crazy. Okay, but if that's the type of community that we're trying to uphold, what? What type of backwater BS is this? Now, reports document the growth of a nonprofit industrial complex in which professional organizations, often dependent on large foundations, on large foundation grants, rather than broad membership, shape urban policy on crime, housing, immigration, and equity, while remaining only weakly accountable to the residents they claim to represent. Victim surveys of business owners, sorry, commercial vacancy rates, and the measurable flight of families and capital from high disorder jurisdictions, blue states, underscore the human and economic costs. Citizen pushback has grown. It has grown. Trust me, it has. It actually at this point it's probably just snowballed or avalanche. I would say. Me personally, I was just a regular citizen going about my day, and then I start to pay. I start to notice. I start to open my eyes. I start to not just rely on what I've been being told. I start to look into it. I actually start to see the outside world, and I'm just like, yo, we are screwed right now. Don't trust the narrative. I refuse the narrative. Go to prycemedia.com. Anywho, like I said, citizen pushback has grown, producing renewed emphasis on localism, support for small businesses, and skepticism toward top-down equity mandates. This brings us to the fundamental clash, right? Community is not merely a social service delivery system or branding opportunity for activists and corporations. It is the lived expression of a people's moral order, their capacity for free association, and their willingness to bear mutual responsibility. Traditional approaches prioritize objective realities about human nature, the dignity of voluntary corporation, the proactive role of local enterprise, and the cultural transmission of trust, self-control, and neighborliness. Neighborliness. There we go. Sheesh. Progressive frameworks often frame existing community structures, local businesses, and traditional norms of association as inherently exclusionary or insufficient, centering racial and identity outcomes, historical grievance, and professional management of belonging as primary goods. Now that's where it it messed up the progressive outlook on everything. Now I understand going forward, progressing. It progressive. We progress forward. Yes, I understand that, but there's a limit to how far you have to go and how fast. No, really, how fast how fast you're moving. It's okay to be progressive. It is okay to be to progress forward, but are you progressing at a speed to where you can still manage it? Are you going too fast where everything's happening all at once? You can't keep track of it. It's everything's going, or are you going too slow? Where it's like you're now controlling everything that's happening. I believe we went too fast, where now things have gone out of control when we are seeing the results of it. Just saying. I'm just saying, okay? If you have anything other than that, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. But critics contend it undermines genuine social capital, abandons the economic engines of neighborhood life, especially in working class and minority communities that suffer most from disorder and capital flight, distorts the statistical and lived realities of trust and commerce, erodes mediating institutions, and substitutes ideological narrative and grant funded activism for the hard work of free people associating and trading with one another, contributing to isolation, preventive commercial decline, and cultural fragmentation. And I know because I lived it. There are times, I remember when I was little, I can't even say little, when I was younger, I would say high school age, which is really not that far. But man, I was the loner. I was a guy just out there, minding my own business, not worried about anything else, not trying to make any new friends. Really not trying to make any new friends. Just there, watching anime. Where did that get me? Single. Still trying to find a wife, but single, unfortunately. So I lived through all of that, and honestly, it's not fun. It's trash. It sucks, and definitely need a different outlook, I would say. Now, the philosophical and ethical dimensions, they run deep. Scripture and the natural law, tradition both affirm that human beings are made for community, not the managed kind, but the kind that arises from loving one's neighbor as oneself, from honest work, and from the free associations that form character. As a community, how are you able to do all this? Or as a community, I pose this question: when was the best time when you're lived in a community sense? What was the best time for you? Let me know down in the comments. The early church practiced radical mutual care while rejecting idleness. Government exists to secure justice and the conditions for flourishing, not to replace the family, the church, and the local marketplace as the primary schools of responsibility. Prioritizing evidence based localism, protecting public order so that businesses can operate, reducing regulatory burdens that crush small operators, and defending the freedom of association against ideological mandates reflects moral duty to the next generation and the most vulnerable. When institutions impose contested ideologies that treat organic community and local enterprise as subject, or that prioritize professional management and identity, organic, sorry, I'm losing myself forever here. Localism. Oh my gosh. it look for me now. Community is number one. You can't have a society without community, and it's something that needs to be revived. I would say needs to be revived. Now, like I said, when institutions impose contested ideologies that treat organic community and local enterprise as suspect, or that prioritize professional management and identity outcomes over the actual safety, prosperity, and trust of the residents, profound questions of authority, subsidiarity, and the common good arise. I sound like Sung Jin Woo. But anywho, the nuances demand careful consideration. Now, addressing genuine historical injustices, supporting entrepreneurship in underserved communities, improving public spaces, and practicing authentic charity are valuable and consistent with American ideals. Mental health resources, re-entry programs, and thoughtful placemaking can serve legitimate ends. They can. Trust me, I know they can. They can, all right? They serve legitimate ends when they do not compromise order or corrode association. Yet, data and lived experience suggest that rapid ideological integration, the professionalization of the community activism, soft on crime policies that destroy commercial corridors, regulatory and DEI burdens that favor large compliant firms over local ones, and the cultural stigmatization of traditional voluntary institutions often correlate with elevated isolation, lowered social trust, Main Street attrition, and resistance to empirical realities concerning the resources of belonging and economic vitality. I will say this with all that said, yes, okay, I understand. The historical injustices, okay, great. Have we learned from them? Yes. One way I know, I'm not a slave. I'm not picking cotton. I don't know if YouTube will just end the stream then and there, but yeah. And saying I have no views, but okay, oh well, it is what it is. Look, I understand all the historical injustices, but first of all, how long ago was it? Second of all, are we in those times now? Third of all, why should we look for not representation, but why should we look for reparation when it, we're fine now? Just saying. Just saying. Okay. Supporting entrepreneurship in underserved communities. Awesome. You know how many black people started businesses under Trump's campaign or presidency, I would say? How many under Biden? Probably not much because the economic realities at that time were just dog water. I'll just say that right now. It was complete crap. Improving public places. Well, now, where do we see that happening? We'll take two examples. We have blue states. Let's go with Chicago. Let's go with Chicago. So we have the blue state, Chicago, and the red state. Oh, hold on. Chicago's not a state. Illinois. I'm sorry. But blue state, Illinois. And then red state, we'll say Texas. We'll say Texas. Now I know everybody in Georgia's gonna be like, "Yo, Jonathan, you're from Georgia. Why didn't you say Georgia?" Look, I'm gonna be real. Okay, I'm gonna be real with all of y'all. All right, there's a lot more opportunities in Texas and Florida than there are here in Georgia. Now, I'm not going to say there's not any opportunities, but there are much more opportunities in Texas and Florida at this present time. Georgia, let's fix this. Let's change this. Let's get those opportunities coming, okay? All right. Anywho, I want to improve public spaces. Look at Illinois, Chicago, really, and then look at Texas. I would say maybe the Dallas, Houston area, or wait, hold on. I think they're too far apart. Let's go with. Do I want to say Austin? Let's go with Austin, even though it might be turning blue. I'm not 100% sure. But let's go with those two places. I'll tell you this right now. It is much safer to live in Austin, Texas than it is in Chicago, Illinois. Why? I mean, look at the policies. What does Chicago offering that Illinois, that Austin isn't, and what is Austin covering? So, why is this one word I had a huge point for? Why is Austin, or what does Austin have that Chicago doesn't, and what does Chicago have that Austin doesn't? I'll tell you what. Less crime. Crime happens, yes, but the percentage of it, most definitely more happening in Chicago than it is in Austin. I'll tell you that right now. The gangs, the shooting, the pew 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 pew, all of that. Less of it's happening in Austin, with a lot more happening in Chicago. Just saying, if you live in Chicago, I recommend getting out. But not if you are part of the gang. And if you come down here, in Georgia and start bringing all that stuff up there, I'm like, no, get your butt back up there, because we ain't dealing with it. I'll tell you right now, I'm not gonna deal with it, and I know it's gonna be from a lot of black people. Look, I ain't for the whole black community right now, okay? I'm just telling you that straight up. Yes, I know I'm black, but we gotta fix this, because right now it's just hell in a basket. All right. Okay. Now with that out of the way, let's continue on, because I think I've kind of just gone down a tangent, but we will continue. Anyway, cultural messaging was profoundly shaped perception, concerns about the decline of neighborliness, the cost of disorder to small businesses, or the capture of community. Language by professional activists are often moralized as selfishness, exclusion, or fear of change. While the body of evidence, declining neighbor interaction, commercial flight, businesses leaving places like New York, 100%, especially with Mandami, especially when you have Mandami. Let me not go down that rabbit hole, but commercial flight. Immeasurable loneliness. So many guys are feeling so lonely. Now, me personally, I really don't care. Why? Because God's on my side. I know He already has a wife picked out for me. He's preparing me for her. He's preparing her for me. And when we come together, it's gonna be done. All right. But there are many young men, especially a lot of young men, where the data shows that they are lonely. They're lonely. They're tired of the dating market, the hookup culture, all this type of stuff. It just, yeah, it's bad. All right. Now, all of that is minimized or attributed solely to systemic forces beyond individual and local agency. Institutional incentives, including foundation funding streams, activist influence in local governance, and media framing, frequently overshadow core outcomes of restored trust and thriving local enterprise. Broader implications extend to every domain. In social life, diverted focus and professionalized mediation leave people more isolated. Culturally, the narrative that organic association is oppression risks producing generations less attached to shared norms and more inclined to grievance or dependence. And I know because my generation. Ugh, it's annoying, okay? It's annoying being a Gen Z. When it's annoying being a Christian, conservative, young black man as a Gen Z. It is annoying dealing with all these other Gen Z people. Very annoying. They only care. Look, the one thing they care about. We need reparations. Do you know what? You know, they care about race. They call people racist for no freaking reason, bro. Shut up with all the faggotry, the retardedness. And they gonna try to get me canceled for saying all that, but look, I don't really care. At this point, you guys want me. You want me to go back to being who I was before. Trust me, you do not want that. No, 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 no. I'll tell you that right now. Anywho, it is annoying. All right, this world is not all about grievance, especially when you want to be dependent. You're saying, "Oh my gosh, yo, I could complain a lot about Gen Z. I could really complain a lot about Gen Z, but we're not gonna go to. We're not gonna go there. We're not gonna go there. Anyway, economically, the hollow of Main Street and the burden of crime and the restoration of voluntary institutions. Sorry, crime and regulation deepen inequality and reduce opportunity. Very much so. Politically, it fuels citizens' demands for local control, deregulation, and the assertion of voluntary institutions, which I am 100% for. Just saying. Just saying. The partial recoveries visible in places that have restored order and supported small businesses demonstrate the course correction is possible when political will and cultural clarity return. Now, looking forward into 2026 and the coming decade, pathways must prioritize national interests, not no local, not no certain community of people, genuine belonging, and the common good. Restore focus on core functions, public safety that allows local businesses to operate without constant fortification, regulatory restraint that favors enterprise over compliance theater, and the defense of free association against ideological capture. Now, uphold the equal dignity of voluntary corporation rather than equity of managed outcomes that substitutes professionals for neighbors. Eliminate mandates that treat traditional community and local commerce as inherently subject in favor of evidence based strategies and the biological and social realities of trust and reciprocity. Reform funding and governance structures that reward professional activism over broad membership and local accountability. Supports policies that strengthen families, churches, and mediating institutions that form character and genuine social capital. Invest in men and women who open shops, coach teams, and build associations, ensuring cultural respect for the work of community rather than its management. Cultural renewal requires recommitting to community as the free association of responsible people over social engineering and the romanticization of managed dependency. The decade over the business of community tests a society's commitment to truth, subsidiarity, subsidiarity, and the conditions of the human flourishing. It forces confrontation with whether ideological conformity and professional meditation, mediation, or clear-eyed realism about preserving institutions dedicated to free association of dedicated to free association, honest commerce, and cultural continuity. Not, and I mean not, transformation through the soft bigotry of low expectations or the replacement of neighbors by grant funding managers. Ethics and statesmanship require balancing compassion for the isolated and the struggling with the unflinching realism about the sources of genuine belonging and an unwavering preference for the free associations that build character over the business of community that manage outcomes. This is the culture clash. It concerns not merely vacancy rates or survey metrics, but the kind of people and nation we will form. One grounded in mutual responsibility, local enterprise, and the equal dignity of free association, which I am praying for, or the one fragmented by professional mediation, grievance, and the triumph of managed identity over lived neighborliness. History will judge how we respond. Trust me, it will. The path forward demands intellectual honesty, moral clarity, policy courage, and renewed fidelity to the community's highest purpose. Thank you for engaging with this deep examination. Like, subscribe, and share this episode with everybody that you know. If this challenged you or clarified your thinking, let me know. Follow me on X at Jonathan Pryce 1. Supports independent discourse that refuses to evade difficult realities by going to prycemedia.com, Prycemedia.com. Until next time, may we pursue truth with both conviction and clarity. God bless. Thanks for coming by. And always remember to keep seeking the kingdom first. This has been the Pryce Podcast. Peace.